cry. Make sure you cry. This is your last time on stage. Make sure you cry. Chloe.
You've got exhibits 1 through 5
Come over here, your comments. What's going on?
and 93. Separated, right? 93 also?
Yes.
Okay.
How didn't it come over here? I don't know. All right, let's find.
I need exhibit number 183. It's a video.
It's bad when it's one of the security officers. Huh?
That was my blood sugar alarm. It went real high.
A blood sugar alarm, because he could lock you up, he said.
Everyone stand, please.
That's what he said. Clank, clank. Let's get this back up in here. Hopefully it comes. Yeah.
You may be seated. Thank you.
I don't know what's going on with you two. Why did they hold the comments?
All right, General, you may.
Hold on, what happened?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm going to leave this up if that's okay, Your Honor.
Right.
Thank you. So we've finally reached the point in trial for closing arguments. And what this essentially means is it's an opportunity for the state of Tennessee to go through, talk about the evidence a little bit, reflect on some of the witnesses, because it's been a pretty long, almost 2 weeks. The state will go first, then one of the defense attorneys will have an opportunity to go, then the state will go again. And Matt, I'll talk a little more about that in a second, but that's because the state carries the burden of proof. So I think each of you should have a jury instruction pamphlet in front of you. I'm going to ask you if you flip to page number 6, it covers the burden of proof. And it seems like it's a common misnomer for the burden of proof to appear to be higher than it actually is for the state of Tennessee. And don't get me wrong, it is a high burden, and we gladly carry that burden every step of the way. But when you read about reasonable doubt, and that, of course, the burden never shifts to the defense. The burden is always on the state of Tennessee. It is a burden. It's not absolute certainty. It does not require you to say, I don't know 100% what happened. That is not what is required by the law. It is not absolute certainty. It's essentially, can you go to bed and let your mind rest easy? Can you, actually, I'm going to do one other thing real quick. What I'm asking you to do is essentially use your own common sense. That's one of the most important things. Okay. And I'm going to give an example of what I mean by this, if I can. It's like Wheel of Fortune. Okay? My handwriting's not the best though. But you get the idea here. It's like Wheel of Fortune. When you see a contestant on Wheel of Fortune and they know the answer to the phrase, or the statement, they don't have all the letters when they see that phrase, but they know what the answer is. And if the state has done that, we have met our burden. And it's important to note that it's not beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's not absolute certainty. That is not what is required by the law, by the state of Tennessee. So that brings me to some of the arguments that Mr. Scott has made through this trial. And might be on that same page. Probably should have written it. Here it is, page 5. In your instructions, in the second paragraph, it states, statements, arguments, and remarks of counsel are intended to help you in understanding the evidence and applying the law, but they are not evidence. And I beg you to remember that. When Mr. Scott gets back up and makes his arguments, remember that. The things that come out of his mouth and that came out of his mouth during trial, that is not the evidence. He tried to get you to speculate on so many things during this trial. He wanted to throw out strange theories with aluminum foil. He wanted to throw out a term that doesn't even matter anymore, SIDS. That came from his mouth, not either of the doctors, but from Mr. Scott. He's asking you to speculate. That is not evidence. I beg you to only think about the items that were put into evidence, the photographs, the recordings, and what came from the witness stand. Do not let them sway you from what actually happened in this case. He kept mentioning cadaver dogs. He wanted you to think about that. But if you remember the cadaver dogs, Tommy Boswell, on his property, what did we hear him say? The cadaver dogs didn't even go up there by the playhouse. He wants you to believe maybe the body wasn't there at that time. He's trying to throw you off, but he didn't show anything. There's no proof. There's no evidence.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you once again, and it's in here in these instructions, that the defendant has no burden to prove anything during this trial. The burden is wholly on the state of Tennessee. Okay? Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. And I believe I said that. The state, we gladly carry this burden. But again, what comes out of Mr. Scott's mouth is not evidence. You heard nothing from the witness stand about cadaver dogs. There's no piece of evidence about cadaver dogs. And Mr. Scott said in his opening statement, humans make mistakes. Do you remember that? Dogs also commit mistakes. And if you remember, Agent Fraley and Agent Gratz, both with the TBI, what did they say? They didn't smell anything in that playhouse until they lifted the black bag, and immediately the smell of decomposition hit them. I submit to you, cadaver dogs, what do they work off of? The smell of decomposition. Don't let that fool you. Mr. Scott also talked a lot about Hunter Wood. We heard a lot about Mr. Wood in this trial. Again, did we hear any witness from the witness stand that ever saw Evelyn with Hunter Wood? There wasn't a witness that ever saw Evelyn with Hunter Wood. And if you remember the text messages that we saw yesterday from essentially Hunter's own mouth, it's pretty clear that he's yet another victim of Megan Boswell. She was feeding him the same lines that she was feeding every other person in this case. Mr. Scott brought up the theory of an accident or the word SIDS. Well, you heard Dr. Malushnik say that in the past 10 years, in the state of Tennessee, a child 12 months or older has not passed away from SIDS or sudden unexplained death. Those are statistics from the state of Tennessee. But somehow, Mr. Scott wants you to believe that somehow that's how this baby died, even though she has foil wrapped around her head, a blanket wrapped around that, inside a trash bag, upside down, in a trash can. Let's go through our timeline just for a minute. What do we know? We know that Evelyn was okay until November of 2019. We know that Evelyn was seen at Thanksgiving by family. And then Megan Boswell started a new job at the Chicken Shack. What do we know after that? Megan Boswell meets Hunter Wood. And we know that Sue Whitson is probably the last person to ever see Evelyn alive again. You remember the picture that Sue took? This is very likely the very last picture of Evelyn Boswell alive. Not taken by Megan Boswell, but taken by the babysitter. Sue Whitson testified that the last time she babysat was the end of November, early December, which just so happened to coincide with when Megan Boswell met Hunter Wood, a guy that she was hoping might change her life. But Evelyn was in the way. What did we hear? Do you remember Megan's friend, Maddie Broom? We heard a little bit about her. Her brother, Stephen Lawrence, tried to help Megan. She drove her to a few of the interviews. And if you remember, Megan was apartment shopping on December 8th. And on that date, Evelyn was not with her. And so Stephen asked her later, after it's been reported that Evelyn's missing, he says, was Evelyn gone by then? And what did Megan say? Yes, Evelyn was gone by then. So that takes our window from December 3rd, essentially when Megan Boswell started working at the Chicken Shack, to December 8th. Evelyn Boswell's 12-month well visit. Do you remember that? Scheduled for December 5th. Megan doesn't call and cancel. She just no-shows. And Casey Saltz, the receptionist there, had to reach out and ask Megan, and Megan gave some excuse, I can't remember what it was, as to why she couldn't bring her, so they rescheduled for the next day. Did Megan show up with Evelyn the next day? No, she didn't. I submit to you, that's because Evelyn was already gone at that point. Casey texts Megan again, and Megan has yet another excuse. The appointment's rescheduled one more time for December 11th, and conveniently, Megan then says, oh, I've decided to change pediatricians. And as we can all imagine, when you change pediatricians, we all know that children have vaccine records and all of the things that come with being, especially that first 12 months of life. They've got a lot of appointments and a lot of vaccinations. So it'd be really, really important to transfer that information to the new pediatrician. Did Megan Boswell do that? No, she didn't. They never got a request from another pediatrician. That was just another line that Megan Boswell told to start trying, I say trying, to cover her tracks. We also know that on December 7th, you saw a text message yesterday from a girl named Haley Marie, and that is the very first time that Megan tells the story her dad has her. December 7th. Keep in mind, Sue Whitson saw Evelyn alive for the last time, and then Megan just stopped showing up. And then by December 7th, she's concocted her plan. And it really explains why so much time goes by. Because I know that's a question we have all had. 2.5 months goes by. 2.5 months. But now we know. We know why. Because Megan Boswell was telling every single person in her family and her closest friends that Evelyn was with her father. So what does a rational person think? Okay, we're glad. I think Tommy even said that from the stand. I was proud of him for stepping up. I was proud of him for stepping up and taking responsibility. But, time continues to pass, and you've heard witnesses, and particularly Bailey and Audrey, Megan's closest friends, they were all starting to talk and to think that something doesn't feel right. Just doesn't feel right. But no one could have known how wrong this was at the time. February 2020, finally, Tommy Boswell says, I've had enough. I want to see my granddaughter. Show her to me by tomorrow, or I'm reporting it to DCS. Well, Megan couldn't do that. Megan knew she couldn't do that because she knew where Evelyn was. We all know where Evelyn was. And so Megan did not produce Evelyn that day, and Tommy finally gets the ball rolling on trying to find this little girl. And they first show up at Hunter Wood's house on the lake in a nice neighborhood, and Megan Boswell's there, but there's no baby. There's no Evelyn. And you remember, the only thing Megan, you remember James Lewis from DCS, the only thing Megan was really able to show was this box from Hunter's bedroom. And you remember what Megan called that box? A memory box. Now, why would you call something a memory box if you are alleging that your child is still alive? This is all Megan Boswell had of Evelyn in that house that she was trying to show DCS that Evelyn was living in. She couldn't show him diapers. She couldn't show him a pack and play. She showed him one outfit that she held up on a hanger, not an outfit that Evelyn had ever worn. There was no evidence that a child had ever been in that house. Now, I'm going to touch on something briefly. If you remember Paul Durant yesterday, going back and trying to just give you a little bit of a timeline. If you remember, he talked about Ethan Perry in the military because Megan Boswell led him to believe that he was the father, even though he had his doubts. She convinced him that he was the father of Evelyn. We know he was not the father. We know that. And he said she was sharing photos daily, constantly sharing photos. Until what day? Do you remember the date? December 3rd. On December 3rd, Megan Boswell stopped sharing photographs of Evelyn. And she continues to send pictures, but if you remember, Agent Durant he's a smart guy. And so he was able to check her full Facebook extraction. And so she continued to send pictures to Ethan, but they weren't recent pictures. It was just another way that she could try to keep this facade going just as long as she could. Mr. Scott wants you to believe that Megan Boswell had a rough life. She was in foster care. But Megan Boswell was in foster care because of Megan Boswell, because she would not go to school. She went to foster care because she was truant. And when she left foster care, she went and lived with her dad. And of course, Evelyn was a baby at this point. I think the testimony was from February to March of 2019. And then her dad said, I'm going to get her a trailer, set her up. He bought her a brand new car, buys her a trailer. He's giving her everything she needs to raise this child. And she goes and lives with her mommy, her grandmother, from April until October of 2019. And then finally into the trailer from October to December. I think it's fair to say that she did not live in that trailer with Evelyn for very long. But in that short period of time, this is what she was able to do to that trailer. Can we look at that for a second? That's what she had her child living in. If that's not neglect, she does this in 2 months. Ladies and gentlemen, I beg you to look at these pictures when you go back in the jury room. That, in 2 months, is what the defendant was able to do to the home her dad provided for her and her child. And within 2 months, Evelyn was dead. And I stated there are, maybe it's just my opinion, there are a lot of victims in this case. Bailey Hawkins, her very best friend. Did you see how difficult it was for Bailey to testify? To look at someone that she trusted, that she loved. Audrey Gibbs, same thing. They are also victims of Megan Boswell. And they will also suffer for the rest of their lives because of what Megan Boswell, the web that she created for them all to get caught in. Erica Stacy, who cared about Megan and Evelyn so much, is a victim. Gail Kite, the foster mother, she's a victim. Ethan Perry, who's serving his country, doing absolutely nothing other than his job, gets pulled up into Megan Boswell's web because Megan Boswell is only worried about Megan Boswell. And I'll submit to you that Hunter Wood, the person that they would like to blame somehow, is also a victim of Megan Boswell. She starts with first blaming Ethan Perry. She does that for a few days. And when she quickly realizes, gosh, law enforcement can figure out that I'm not telling the truth here, I guess I better tell something different, then she goes to her mom. She blames her mom, her own mother. She's willing to blame all the time knowing. I mean, we know, let's find the picture. We know where Evelyn was. You see Evelyn?
Oh.
That's where Evelyn was. There she is. Evelyn Boswell sat there in that trash can for 2.5 months. And her mom discarded her, not just Evelyn, but everything that was associated with Evelyn. Everything. Because she didn't need it anymore. Everything. She didn't need that stroller anymore, so she left it behind. She didn't need the clothing. Do you remember all the pictures that came in and all that stuff that was in that shed? Because she didn't need it anymore, because she knew where Evelyn was. The defense wants you to believe that Hunter Wood is the one that backed Megan's car up to that shed in the middle of the day. In the middle of the day, Hunter's just going to go over there. He has a truck. The testimony was that Hunter had a big truck. Now, why in the world, if he had a truck? I mean, this clearly took more than one trip. I guarantee you. Look at all this stuff. They want you to believe that Hunter Wood backed Megan Boswell's car up to that shed that day. Tommy came home. It was in the middle of the day. Where's the diagram? Do you remember the diagram of the scene? Look at this diagram. They somehow want you to believe that Hunter Wood pulls up this driveway and comes to this shed right here, right in front of Omani's house. Tommy's house, up on the hill, in the middle of the day. Is that reasonable? What is reasonable? How about that Megan Boswell is the one who drove her own vehicle, the vehicle her dad bought for her, up to that shed, because Megan Boswell is the one who had a key fob. Remember, there's a gate there that only opens with a key fob. That's the only way a car is coming through that driveway. And Megan Boswell lived there. You just heard that she lived at her dad's house and at her mommy's house. And so they're not going to be surprised if Megan Boswell is on the property. She's the one who dumped Evelyn's property there. She's the one who took the trash can there. Not Hunter, not anyone else. It's Megan Boswell. Do you remember there was more than one text message? And of course, keep in mind, the whole time these text messages are coming through, that's where Evelyn is, okay? Just think about that for a second. I'm not going to take the time to go through these because you can do that. You can take all of this back with you into the jury room. I encourage you to go back and read all of these text messages and remember the dates that we've talked about. But while Evelyn Boswell is sitting in this trash can and people are asking Megan, how's Evelyn? What does Megan say more than once? Mean as fuck. First of all, she's a 12-month-old child. And every other witness said that she was a lovely child to be around.
Wow.
And it's not a very nice statement to begin with, but it's definitely not a very nice statement when your kid is shoved down into a trash can upside down. And you know that. Agent Fraley was on the stand, and you heard Megan Boswell admit that she knew Evelyn was dead. She's telling all of those stories to law enforcement. And she told more than one person, Evelyn's mean as fuck. And when Agent Grass asked her about it, she goes, what's your point? What's your point? And that's an interview with Agent Grass that you can also go back and watch if you'd like to do that. So we saw the defendant enjoyed crying during this trial because she has an audience and she really enjoys that. But did we see her crying any other time? Did we see her crying from the witnesses on the witness stand and what they told us about her? Did we see her crying in the evidence that came in? No, Megan wasn't crying. Do you think she was crying when she filled out this apartment application with Hunter Wood, where they list 3 occupants are going to live in the apartment? And at first glance, we're like, oh, Megan, Hunter, and Evelyn. But that's not what the defendant told David Gratz. Do you remember what she told him? She said the 3rd occupant is the baby she's pregnant with because Hunter doesn't want Evelyn to live with him. Of course, we could also look at the date on that application, January 4th of 2020. And we also know another reason that Evelyn would not be living with them. Was Megan crying here? In 2020, when she posts on Instagram, so excited for our new home. Think Megan was crying when she posted that? To me, it looks like maybe Megan's just moving on with her life. As if Evelyn never even existed. What about here? Also posted in 2020. Keep in mind, Evelyn's still upside down in a trash can because Megan's not told anyone where she is. She's still spinning her lies. Do you think she sat here when she's picking out furniture for their new house?
Wow.
That she's sad today? She has the gall to sit here and cry today and pretend she can't look at the pictures of what she did to her child? What about this one? Proud of my baby. New 2020 High Country. Was she sad then?
Wow.
What about in December? weeks after Evelyn has been brutally murdered. What is Megan Boswell doing? Does she look, maybe we should zoom in. Does she look sad here? Maybe she is. Sure doesn't look like it. Her kid's upside down in a trash can. She's going to the aquarium with her new boyfriend. What about here? She doesn't look very sad to me. Hiking in Blowing Rock in 2020. No Evelyn. Evelyn's missing. Still missing at this time. There's Megan hiking with her new boyfriend, moving on with her life. Not crying. Maybe Megan Boswell didn't have an end game. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she hoped that Evelyn would never be found. But she had to know at some point these stories were going to catch up with her. Ladies and gentlemen, and I'm asking you today, 5 years later, February 2025, to show Megan Boswell that her stories have caught up with her. The evidence shows the defendant. This person is the only person responsible for her child being dead. You heard it straight from Dr. Malushnik. Evelyn shouldn't be dead. Evelyn should not be dead. I believe the defense brought up SIDS, reflux, rollover. I believe they even brought up a tongue tie as being a possible cause of death for Evelyn. How does that result? Any of those things. You know, he said in the beginning, the state can't even prove how she died. Are you kidding me? How does that end up with a baby in a trash can? The DNA. Let's talk about the DNA for a second. You've got the gloves that are in the trash can. And the defense somehow wants you to believe that gloves will keep fingerprints from happening. And then I guess whoever did that then took the gloves off, cut them up because they're cut up in small pieces and you can look at them when you get back there, and then dispose of them in the same trash can that the baby's in. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And funny enough, guess what is there? Is DNA that matches Megan Boswell, that matches Evelyn. Go back through the testimony. There's not one piece of DNA, not one, that shows anyone, not Hunter Wood, not anyone else other than Megan Boswell is associated with that trash can, the evidence in the trash bags. And you heard Marla Gray, the DNA expert, talk about the mixture of DNA on some pillows that were found in the shed. And you also heard her say that that could even be from the person who made them in the factory. Or it could be from the person who touched the pillow at Walmart when they were trying to decide if they were going to buy it. It wasn't even enough DNA to test. So don't be led to believe that because of that, there's some unknown stranger who did these things. Look at the evidence. Look at the evidence that's in front of you. We have evidence. We have shown you the evidence. Don't think about the speculation. Don't think about the what ifs. Look at the evidence. Some really, really good. If I could, can I see the trash can for just a second, please? Thank you. Whose fingerprints were on the trash can? Do you remember what Agent Hoover said from the TBI yesterday? Of course, he's removed the rim. He talked about how it's smooth under the rim. If you're going to carry a trash can, how do you pick it up to carry it under the rim? Whose fingerprints were under that rim? Megan Boswell. Megan Boswell's fingerprints were into that round. If we look at Exhibit 17, can you see the black trash bag there? Whose fingerprints are on that trash bag? Megan Boswell's fingerprints. And you heard Dr. Malushnik say, and I think you can see for yourself, that trash bag's not just gently placed down into the trash can. It has been forcefully, and it's a hard image. It's a very difficult image to think about. But that's the evidence that we've been left with, that black trash bag was placed on top of Evelyn in the white trash bag. And it was forcefully pushed down. Compressed, I think is a word that was used during the trial. And that's how Megan Boswell's fingerprints ended up on that black trash bag. Even more damning than that is the fact that Megan Boswell's fingerprints are on the foil wrapped around Evelyn's head. I would love to know a different explanation for how Megan Boswell's fingerprints got on that foil, on that trash can, on the black trash bag, except for the fact that she murdered her baby. She put her in that trash can with food trash and debris, covered her body, essentially mummified her, and tossed her away, literally, with the trash. Mr. Scott would like for you to think that the doctor's testimony, just that they shouldn't be able to just decide things in a vacuum. He kept mentioning, well, what if the child's dead on a table? And I think we all know that is not how doctors operate. Doctors operate off of medical histories and any information they can get. And that's what both doctors did in this case. They took everything, her birth records, her pediatric records, the scene itself, before they came to their conclusion. They don't operate in a vacuum. I think those were the words that Dr. Malushnik used, is they do not operate in a vacuum. And they determined what? Both doctors agree that this was a violent homicide, and that Evelyn Boswell died from some sort of asphyxiation. So, suffocation, I guess, is the easiest way to say it. So, if it was not for, say, the position of her body upside down in the trash can, that could have killed her. We'll say it wasn't that. Then maybe it was the blanket that was pulled up over. Remember that? How it was tightly pulled up over her face. That could have been what it was. Or it could have been upside down in the trash can. Could have also been the trash bag that she was placed inside of, where she was unable to breathe. Could have been the foil that was wrapped around her head. Could have been the trash can itself. If you remember, the doctor testified that her face was compressed up against the side of the trash can. And her body was in a reverse S curve to where her head was so far bent back into a reverse S because of how the defendant compressed her body down into the trash can. Forcefully compressed her body down into the trash can. Her head and neck were wrapped so tightly with foil that even when they removed the foil, you could still see the impression of the foil on her face. You could still see the trash can form still to her face.
Wow.
Quickly, I'm going to ask you to go to your verdict form page. And it's going to be probably at the very end of your packet. Page 50 is where it starts. So these verdict forms, I'm going to show you one example. Okay. So you'll see here, this is just for count one, and I'm just giving it as an example. We, the jury, find the defendant and mark the appropriate box. So if you go back in the jury room and you agree as a whole that Megan Boswell is guilty of first-degree murder, you do not need to consider anything below that. Those are what we call lesser included offenses, and we're required by law to put those on the verdict form for you to consider. But if you unanimously agree that Megan Boswell is guilty of first-degree murder, you can check that box and move on. You are not required to go through every single one of those if you believe that she is guilty of what she's charged with in that count. And if you go through these, you will see that each count of the indictment is similar. There are lesser included offenses for each one of these. Again, I will ask you that if you can unanimously agree, you do not need to go any further on that verdict form. The state has to prove several elements for each charge, and those are also in your packet. Count 1 is premeditated first-degree murder, that the defendant unlawfully killed the victim, that the defendant acted intentionally, and that the killing was premeditated. The next page defines premeditation for you as an act that was done after the exercise of reflection and judgment. It means that the intent to kill must have been formed prior to the act itself. So that means essentially if when Megan Boswell wrapped Evelyn in the blanket, and you think, well, maybe she didn't have premeditation then. She could have formed premeditation in the time where she applied for oil. Or premeditation in the time that she put her in that trash bag. Or premeditation in the time that she pushed the next trash bag on top of her body. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you, there's nothing about this case that is not premeditated. Count 2 and count 3 are what we call felony murder in the state of Tennessee. That's where we allege that a murder happened during a certain felony. And these felonies are aggravated child abuse and aggravated child neglect. Again, those go hand in hand with premeditated first-degree murder. We submit to you that not only did the defendant abuse the child, but that she neglected the child. And one of the perfect examples is how she left her in the trash can. That's neglect. Leaving her in the trash can, that's abuse. And it resulted in her death, which is felony murder. And we have to prove that the child is under the age of 8. There are many counts of false report. Page 29, I think, is where it starts. And it's counts, I believe, 7 through 17. The state must prove that the statement was made by the defendant, that it was made in response to a legitimate inquiry by law enforcement, and that it concerned a material fact about the incident within the officer's concern. And if you remember, the defendant herself admits more than once that what she told the police was not true. So I submit that the state has proven each of those counts. Count 19, abuse of a corpse, page 30. The state must prove that the defendant mistreated a corpse in a manner offensive to the sensibilities of an ordinary person, that she acted without legal privilege and acted knowingly, and that count speaks for itself, along with count 20, which is failure to report a death. A lot about this case really has been more about Megan Boswell than about this child, Evelyn. But Evelyn mattered. She deserved to grow up. She deserved that, but her mom took that away from her. And there's no evidence that anyone else was involved.
Exactly.
I think you can see this was a pretty good investigation. It was very, thorough, and the evidence continued to point in only one direction. The evidence only pointed at one person, Megan Boswell. She failed her daughter. She had the chance to keep her safe, to protect her, to give her to someone else if she couldn't handle her. You heard from the witnessing, there were people that she could have given Evelyn to that would have given her a beautiful life. But instead, she violently murdered her daughter. She told story after story after story for 2.5 months. And maybe the worst part is that she just went on with her life as if Evelyn had never even existed. But Evelyn did exist. Evelyn is a real person. And Megan Boswell should not be able to go on as if Evelyn did not exist. There are things we will never know about what happened. None of us will ever know everything. I think it's fair to say that we do know that Evelyn was in the way. She was in the way of Megan Boswell living the life that she thought she deserved, that she wanted to live. So Megan removed her. It's as simple as that. So today, 5 years later, almost 5 years to the day that Evelyn was reported missing, we are going to ask that you hold Megan Boswell accountable for what she did for her child. I submit to you the state has proven every count and every element of every count beyond a reasonable doubt. And we are going to ask that you return a verdict of guilty.
Thank you, General. Mr. Scott, you may close.